Good afternoon, everybody. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I suppose before I talk about broadband, I just want to take a moment to recognize what an incredible accomplishment it was last week to get the bipartisan infrastructure bill accomplished. I can tell you, prior to this job, I was governor of Rhode Island for 6 years, and every year we were told an infrastructure bill was around the corner. It's going to come, Governor. The infrastructure money's coming. But, of course, it never did. And President Biden delivered. President Biden stepped up. He led. None of this could have been done without his leadership. He was so personally engaged, working across the aisle to compromise, to get results, to deliver for the American people, and that's what happened. And I don't think we can underestimate the impact of this. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act will help Americans and deliver for Americans. As it relates to the Commerce Department, it is going to enable us at the Commerce Department to fund key priorities that will have very tangible positive impacts for American workers and businesses. Just to tick off a few things, it's substantial funding for NOAA to increase climate resiliency and restore and improve coastal habitats. It is, very excitingly, permanent authorization for the Minority Business Development Agency and $1.6 billion to that agency. MBDA, which resides in the Commerce Department, is the only federal agency solely focused on promoting the growth, development, and resiliency of minority-owned businesses. So it's pretty incredible. But today I'm going to focus particularly on broadband, as Corinne said. President Biden has set a very ambitious goal for his administration that we must connect all Americans, regardless of where they live, to high-speed, affordable internet. And thanks to the passage of the bill, we will be able to accomplish just that. The Infrastructure Investment Act allocates $65 billion to expand broadband in communities all across America, to create low-cost options and subsidize the cost of service for those who need it. Of that $65 billion, about $45 billion will be coming to the Commerce Department at NTIA to administer that program. I will say this is an area that I am particularly passionate about, having been a governor during the pandemic and being with people who didn't have broadband, children who couldn't go to school, people who couldn't go see a doctor or a therapist. It is heartbreaking, and it showed in a very real and human way how essential broadband is. And the fact of the matter is we have to close the digital divide, period. And this infrastructure bill will allow us to do that, and the $48 billion coming to the Commerce Department will allow us to do that. Beyond the physical infrastructure, laying fiber, affordability is just as important. Affordability is just as important as access. It does a family no good if there's broadband in their community but they can't afford it. Closing the digital divide means both providing the broadband and making sure it's affordable. So the investments in this bill will help ensure every American can access affordable high-speed internet, which means requiring funding recipients to offer a low-cost affordable plan. Everyone who gets a penny of this money is required to offer a low-cost affordable plan. Provide federal funding for broadband services to low-income families, requiring providers to be transparent about pricing to help families do comparison shopping for services where they have competitive options. I will confess this is going to be a massive undertaking for the Department of Commerce, but we're up for it. We've been planning for months, and we're up for it. We plan to work in close collaboration with states, counties, cities, community-based organizations, and the private sector in partnership to develop grant programs which will ensure that we roll this out in an efficient manner. Broadband is the gateway to economic opportunity, and so in order to open that gateway, we're putting equity at the center of everything we do. I will say To truly transform our economy into one that works for all Americans and one that will make our country more competitive on the world stage, we have to make investments in a way that is equitable and just. And we view this lens across all of the work we do at the Commerce Department, and it will be particularly front and center with the broadband work that we will be doing. It will not be easy. This will be technically difficult. It's an implementation challenge, but it is necessary. It is necessary, and I know that implementing this in partnership with our partners on the ground, we will be able to close the digital divide, close the innovation divide, and achieve the President's goal of making sure that every American, regardless of where they live, or the color of their skin, or their income, has access to broadband. And I will say, 30, 40, 50 years from now, we will look back on this as the turning point, as a critical turning point, because now that we're moving even more towards a digital economy and a data economy and a tech economy, nobody can be left behind, and that means everybody has broadband. And due to the President's leadership, we're going to be able to deliver on that. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Go ahead, thank you, Secretary, for being here. Can you walk us through the logistics of how the money is going to be allocated? From what I understand, at least $100 million will go to states. And then is it totally up to the states to determine what projects to launch, or will there be federal oversight? But basically, I'm trying to understand how the money is going to get funneled through and how the remaining money is going to be allocated.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the practicality of it, each state will receive $100 million, as you say. The remaining money will be allocated based on need, based on how many underserved households there are in that state. So the whole name of the game here is to focus on the underserved and the unserved, and on affordability. We have to make sure that we don't spend this money overbuilding, which means we'll have to work very closely with the FCC and using their maps to make sure that we focus the money where broadband doesn't exist now. So we plan, everyone gets $100 million. Beyond that, it'll be based upon unserved, based upon need. We're going to give out a grant per state, and each state will then give grants to sub-grantees on the ground. We are, as I just said, very focused on equity and making sure there's affordability and ubiquity, which means we have to be flexible. Like in a state like Rhode Island, where I'm from, there's no rural Rhode Island. So, it's a city, it's an urban place. So the needs in a place like Rhode Island will be more around affordability, inner city access. Contrast that with New Mexico, completely different topography. 50% of people on tribal lands don't have broadband. We need to account for the flexibility there, which is why it's going to be a state by state. There will be a tremendous amount of federal oversight and transparency. Every state has to put their plan online for everyone to see, and we are going to have very strict criteria to make sure that we achieve the goals of affordability and access.
When do you think the first expansion projects will get underway?
I'm sorry, say again?
When will the projects get underway? When do you think states will physically start to
so, I would say first we have to have the law, and then it'll take us some time to get set up, some number of months. So, I mean, it's hard to say. I would say, well into next year.
Thank you.
Secretary, I'll step in. With this new money, Secretary, question for you. Can you guarantee people living in internet dead zones? Internet dead zones.
Thanks so much for taking
internet dead.
The first question I have is, can you talk a bit about how quickly Americans will feel the impacts of this, and as well as if there are some more longer-term goals that maybe are 10, 20 years down the line? Can you talk a little bit about the timing of this?
So I say, first, we are already implementing, in the rescue package, Commerce received some money related to broadband, and we're already putting that out now. There's a tribal initiative, there's a rural initiative, USDA has that, we're working with them. So some Americans will start to see relief, this year, soon. as I just said over here, the rest of this, I think it will take us some number of months to start getting the money out the door. It'll be staged in. We want to get relief out there as fast as possible, but in a quality way. So some of the affordability metrics, providing subsidies, that can happen more quickly. Laying fiber across America, that will take time, but we'll be creating jobs at every step of the way.
One other quick question is just about, can you talk a little bit about the equity portion? Are there percentages or numbers you want to hit? Maybe you won't speak to them publicly here, but I'm wondering how you're going to measure success.
Every single American has access to high-speed, affordable broadband, which means truly affordable.
Does that include people living in internet dead zones?
Thank you, Secretary. Appreciate your being here. Obviously, former governor, you know the importance of the coordination with governors and the various states. Can you talk a little bit about the outreach so far, and are you taking the lead on that in terms of being in touch with these various governors as they implement these changes?
Yes. So I should tell you, we've been preparing for this. We are figuring out already how we're going to staff it within the Department of Commerce, how we're going to make sure we have accountability. I've already had several convenings with governors. I've been speaking with governors, with mayors, with tribal leaders, and we will, now that this is official, we're going to significantly ramp up that engagement.
And just to follow up very quickly, as you talked about, you need to target rural areas and then more urban areas. How do you determine which areas you're addressing first? Is it an all-hands-on-deck approach? How can we expect to see the rollout happen?
We are asking each state to give us a plan. So we are saying to them, show us a plan that guarantees every single person in your state has access to high-speed, affordable internet. And then we're going to evaluate that plan, adjust it, provide technical assistance to make sure at the end of the day we hit the goal.
And just to push you on the timeline a little bit, some of the physical infrastructure projects are estimated to take 6 months to a year. Is that about the same timeline that you're tracking for this?
Look, it's really hard to say. We have to be flexible. Laying fiber in a place with a mountainous, difficult topography, that could take years.
Thank you, Corinne. Thank you, Secretary Raimondo. I want to ask you about implementation. It seems to be the focus of a lot of our questions. 1 year from yesterday, the midterm elections will take place. Can you guarantee that people all around the country will see that implementation take place before the midterm elections? And what type of projects are you looking at in terms of implementation between now and then?
So certainly Americans will feel and see in their communities much of the progress that the Biden administration is overseeing. I mean, from the rescue package to the infrastructure package. It is not the case. I think every community will see activity and action. Some communities will start to see, people working, laying fiber. But I also think it's important to be realistic and have to be honest with people, which is to say, we want to get this right. It's more important to get it right than to rush. So I think people will see their state putting together a plan. They'll see us starting to move out on that plan. But not everybody's going to have broadband a year from now.
A year after President Obama signed the Recovery Act, he acknowledged that this idea of shovel-ready jobs is not reasonable. It doesn't exist. And would you agree with that statement in terms of what President Obama said after the passage and his signature on the Recovery Act back in 2009?
Look, there's all different kinds of projects. There are many projects that are shovel-ready. I can tell you that from being governor. In my state, there are many projects that are shovel-ready, need money to be added. There are others, and broadband is an example, that require more planning, that require thoughtful technical planning. So the whole point of the infrastructure package is to deliver for Americans. I promise you this, a year from now, many people will be working in high-quality jobs because of this package. But I also promise you that the president wants us to get it right. And if it takes a little longer to lay the groundwork for fiber and broadband, then we're going to do that.
What's your message to people who live in internet dead zones?
I can't hear. I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask, thank you, about the deadline that your department had imposed to get voluntary data from semiconductor manufacturers and other companies. Did your department receive all of the information that it was looking for from these CEOs? And then also, what's your reaction to China appearing to be angry about TSMC's compliance with your request? They called it extortion of confidential information from chip firms and talked about concerns that the U.S. could use this information to sanction Beijing. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, so the deadline was yesterday, so we haven't yet had the opportunity to go through all the submissions. I will tell you, over the past couple of weeks, I have spoken to the CEOs of a number of semiconductor companies, including TSMC, asked them for their compliance, and they all said that they would be complying and sending us the information that we're asking for. It is laughable to suggest that it's coercion because it is voluntary. We're asking them to cooperate with us. And the truth is that this is what President Biden has said to us on his team: use every tool that we have to deliver relief for the American people around supply chains. And so that's what we're doing. This is a tool in the commerce toolbox, and we're using it. And I think to great effect. And every CEO I've talked to, including TSMC, has said it's a good idea. It will increase transparency in the supply chain, which will cut down on bottlenecks, and that's why they're complying. Their own choice.
Does China's reaction make you think that the U.S. should have a more clear strategy toward possibly defending Taiwan, given their response to this? You've called the semiconductor shortage a national security crisis. They're obviously being very responsive to the White House probe for more information, and they're hedging on that. What do you think about how we should approach Taiwan, defending Taiwan?
I think what I've said, which is that the lack of domestic production in America of semiconductors poses not only an economic threat, a national security threat, and we need Congress, the House, to pass the CHIPS Act, or USICA, as quickly as possible so that we can get to the business of making more chips in America.
Are you pushing for that vote to come up soon?
Yes, tomorrow would be great.
Let's take 2 more so we can let her go. Go ahead, right you in the back, the gentleman.
Thank you. You've mentioned a couple of answers, the jobs created from this. I'm curious, is there a workforce right now that is able to fulfill this broadband expansion? I mean, do we train people how to do this?
Such a good question. So I would say yes and no. We, in working with Congress on this portion of the bill, we specifically said keep it flexible so we could use some of the money for workforce training. And to the question of equity, that the folks that we train ought to look like America, right? And to the question of what will Americans see, what they're going to see soon is people in their community, men, women, people of color, white people, laying fiber. And today, we don't have enough trained people. No, we don't. But some of this money will be used for workforce training so that we can train folks, and in the process of doing that, diversify, the ranks of electricians and technicians and folks who are, deploying the fiber in America.
I want to ask you about broadband, but just first, the Commerce Department made a really consequential decision to add NSO Group to its entity list, right? And could you talk a little bit about was there a specific breach that led to that? Was there evidence that their software is being used to monitor U.S. citizens? What was it that led you to make that decision?
Usually we don't comment on the details. I will simply say it went through the same process, interagency process that all of these decisions go through. We came to a determination that it was necessary for national security in order to impose that.
Okay, and then on the broadband question, Congress exempted the infrastructure bill, this $42 billion pot of money that you have, from the Administrative Procedure Act. which requires a number of things in terms of public notice.
I'm having bad flashbacks to law school. Administrative law.
Well, it's really important for journalists because we use things like the Freedom of Information Act to get information on how government is spending money that might be going to private sector companies. So since we don't have that, how do you expect us to hold you accountable for how this money is being spent?
So I'll confess I haven't gone that deeply into the weeds of that particular provision, but I will say this. As I said here, we are deeply committed to transparency. The way to build public trust is transparency. As a result, every single state plan is going to have to be put online. So you can comb through every detail of every plan to see where every penny goes. And I think that's really important.
Thank you so much.
Secretary, do you have a message for people living in internet dead zones? Can you guarantee they'll get
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I hope you get out to enjoy the weather.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Internet dead zones, right?